Hello and welcome to another half hour of Rad TV UK, the new YouTube news channel soon to be available on satellite TV. Well, tonight we've got forced labour in the UK, the costs of war, the NHS boss that hasn't resigned, toxic dust storms in Iran, and finally the mystery of the 9/11 expert who was shot dead along with his dog. We're going to start with forced labour in the UK. The news is that the courts have overturned the government's intention of forcing people to work for nothing. And if they don't work for nothing, they lose their job seekers allowance, and so they get no money at all from the state. That's the reports we're reading.
From this particular report, which I think occurred in the New Statesman, it argues that it would be possible in theory somehow to get people working compulsorily, but that the way the government's gone about it is wrong, and that it ought in theory to be against Article 4 of the European Convention on Human Rights, but in practice the author of this report reckons that there should be a way of getting around that and ignoring the European Convention.
So this court case where the judges, lots of fanfare, wasn't there in the media, they said,
yes.
Oh, you know, the government's shameful forced labour has now been overturned by the courts.
Yes.
But the people who've carefully read the judgment and written this article in the New Statesman magazine, they're saying that's not right.
Yeah, that is how I understand it. There were two people who shared a solicitor and challenged the situation they found themselves in. One was working for no wages in Poundland.
No wages.
Yeah. And the other was a out-of-work truck driver who had been forced to clean furniture for 6 months.
6 months,
Yes.
no wages.
No wages.
They get job seekers allowance.
Yes.
But the company that gets the work from them, I'd like that, wouldn't you? Wouldn't we all like to have some people work for us for 6 months for no wages? I wonder how you qualify for that bit of good luck. Do we know anything about who gets free workers and who doesn't? I wonder if I could sack the person they replace and then get that person to work for me for no wages.
Dare say you could.
Then I'd be saving something like £20,000 a year. That would be very nice.
Mm-hmm. The next item is about the cost of war, particularly the cost of war for the United States. Apparently there have been at least 6,600 deaths and 253,000 brain injuries and 1,700 amputations. And we're getting this report from Wired magazine, which admits it's hard to find official figures to confirm the costs of 10 years of war, but they have been pretty bad for the US Army as well as for their victims in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Wired magazine's a reliable source, no doubt about it, and they've been using figures that have been carefully collected by the US Congress. Mm-hmm. The Pentagon, of course, has not made it easy for them. It took a major research program by the US Congress to find out just how many injuries and deaths there had been. So we can rely on those figures as being based on the official figures. They're almost certainly an underestimate for various reasons. First of all, it doesn't include the contractors, the mercenaries, of which there were very, very many in Iraq and Afghanistan. It probably doesn't include the non-Americans in American uniform, people like Mexicans who've been promised American citizenship if they will first of all spend a few years fighting for America in Iraq. It may not include those people, we don't really know. And of course it may be an underestimate anyway. But I think the truly shocking figure is the 250,000 brain injuries. Brain injuries are very hard to ascertain for sure. If they're sure there were 250,000 brain injuries, chances are there were 500,000. If you then add in the ones who haven't been diagnosed, you're looking at over 1 million brain injuries. These people are walking around, mostly in America now, with indeterminate damage to their brains.
Stafford Hospital in the English Midlands, where it has been revealed a lot of malpractice resulting in deaths and illnesses.
This has been very widely reported, of course, in the UK media. Nobody can accuse them of covering up the fact of, as they say, 1,200 excess deaths. 1,200 people died over a period who should not have died due to appalling treatment. Treatment at Stafford was not just wrong, it was truly dreadful. That's what a presumably cautious lawyer said in his 1,700-page report. A culture of bullying from the top down. Families of the dead are calling for criminal prosecutions. Failures at every level. Now, every level means every level. It should also include the most senior level, one might imagine, and certainly the families are saying this. The most senior level, they're paid probably in excess of £300,000 a year. And we're told that the justification for the very high pay, which people like the chief executive of that NHS area trust received, is because they're the ones where the buck stops. The buck stops here, they get the pay, they're responsible for the culture, they're responsible for the activities under them, they set the tone, they're the leaders. That's what we're told. Yes. So what's happened in Stafford? Well, there's an invisible person at the heart of this scandal. To my knowledge, this guy has not appeared in any broadcasts concerning it. He's not been quoted. He's not issued any statements even, personal statements. His name is Sir David Nicholson. He's the head of the NHS, so you might expect him to comment as head of the NHS on this appalling, worst scandal ever in the NHS. He hasn't commented, but can you believe this? This man was actually in charge of the Stafford Hospital, the trust that ran Stafford Hospital. He was the chief executive. He was the guy where the buck passed when 1,200 people died unnecessarily. He's head of the NHS today. He's head of the NHS tomorrow. Nobody's interviewed him. Nobody's even offered a blank screen to say, we tried to interview Sir David Nicholson, he wouldn't answer any of our questions. Oh, the crocodile tears we've had from the media, but Sir David Nicholson, the man where the buck stops, probably earning now as head of the NHS in excess of £300,000 a year, ultimately responsible for 1,200 deaths, a culture of the bullying from the top down. He's invisible.
And how could this be remedied? The government would have to take action, presumably.
They have come up with some recommendations which may change things in the future. For instance, they're talking about some sort of protection for whistleblowers. The extraordinary state at the moment in the NHS, if you blow the whistle, you're in breach of a contract and you're liable to be sacked. That's got to be, you know, quite astonishing, and the media haven't really commented on that either. But they're talking about improving that. Of course, the relatives want this man sacked. Some people are even talking about criminal investigation for corporate manslaughter, which is now an offence.